setup with the cushions. It's nice. I've never seen this kind of setup.
Yeah, that way people can be more comfortable. Those chairs are not comfortable.
I worked at a very progressive school for like a long time.
Yeah.
And, they always, for meetings, they always had like options for the kids because some kids like sit in a chair. It used to make a lot of sense to me. Actually, one of my kids could not sit in a chair, so this was like very good to have that option for years. She's good now.
We usually have sitting chairs, but we haven't taken. There's also something else that
Yeah. And then is the audience usually like seminary students?
most of them, my faculty.
Okay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to chapel today. I'm Laura Sasaki Norton. I'm a third-year Master of Divinity student here at Union. I want to say thank you to the Mainline Protestants of Union for making this space for chapel service, especially the co-chairs Bethany Day, Connor Williams, and Andrew Laro. And thank you to the whole chapel team, Dean Montez, and the whole chapel team for your support. I was once a small, quiet, and compliant Japanese-American woman in my mainline Lutheran church, eagerly orienting myself toward the white culture that I found in my congregations, the white pastors, the white fellow congregants, the white and therefore right ways of being religious and spiritual. I was grateful that they'd have me. When my children were little, I became a Sunday school teacher and led women's Bible studies, careful to adhere to the Christianity that I learned from my experiences in my church and my European descent relatives on my father's side, which clearly had me rejecting any kind of spirituality practiced by my Japanese mother, relatives, and ancestors. Buddhism and Shinto, the reverence of ancestors, were to be turned away from in order to be the proper kind of Christian. My public education from elementary through university in the Seattle, Washington area never included any mention of Executive Order 9066, or the incarceration of tens of thousands of Japanese Americans, including thousands from our neighborhood and state. It wasn't until just a few years ago that I learned my own hometown was the site of forced removal of Japanese Americans whose land and strawberry farms had been bought up after their removal by Miller Freeman, a newspaper publisher who agitated for their removal and for what he called a white man's Pacific Coast. As a result, his now billionaire grandson, Kemper Freeman, owns huge swaths of land in Bellevue, the area where Microsoft began and has flourished over the last few decades. Information, history. When I learned a few years ago about this powerful Japanese-American woman named Yuri Kochiyama, I thought, what? A vocal Asian-American woman creating change? She inspired me to become a louder voice for justice within my Lutheran congregation, at the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, national gathering in 2022, in my city, and now here in New York City at Union Theological Seminary. The Christianity that I now practice goes along with my learnings and practices of Buddhism, Shinto, and accompanying reverence for the ancestors who have helped to lift me out of oppressive relationships and systems. My spirituality is much more expansive and feels authentic to who God made me to be. I am grateful for the role that Yuri Kochiyama has played in my life as an anti-racism activist, artist, and theologian. We are very lucky that we have an esteemed guest here, and I would like to introduce her now. Akemi Kochiyama Ladson is a Harlem-based writer, scholar activist, and nonprofit consultant. The granddaughter of human rights activist Yuri Kochiyama, Akemi is the co-director of the Yuri Kochiyama Solidarity Project and co-editor of Passing It On, a memoir of Yuri Kochiyama. Centered in intersectional feminism, Akemi's work and writing and work is focused on education, community building, and the power and potential of radical solidarities. Please help me to welcome Akemi Kochiyama Ladson.
So thank you so much to Laura and Nobuko and the Union Theological Seminary for inviting me to take part in this chapel for the Japanese American Day of Remembrance. Before I officially begin my remarks, I just want to say a few words about how meaningful it is for me on a personal level to actually be speaking here today. I have many, many connections to this neighborhood and community. To start with, I grew up just down the street from here in the Manhattanville Projects on 126th Street and Broadway, where my grandparents, Yuri and Bill Kochiyama, raised their 6 kids and hosted thousands of guests and organized for over 4 decades. Right across the street from the Manhattanville Projects is the From Harlem with Love mural on Old Broadway. It's a community-designed and painted mural education project which I took part in and which was lovingly created in honor of the friendship and solidarity between Yuri and Malcolm X in 2016. Just down the street from the mural on 126th Street in Amsterdam is where my grandfather, Bill Kochiyama, grew up, in the Sheltering Arms Orphanage. It's where the public swimming pool is now, if you know where that is. He grew up there in the 1920s and 30s. So you could say my family has been building community in this part of West Harlem for going on a century now. Throughout that time, Union Theological Seminary has remained a steadfast community partner and resource, providing space to gather physically and spiritually, and welcoming diverse communities and people of all faiths to study and practice interreligious engagement. I am grateful to Union Theological's ongoing commitment to centering spirituality and activism and social justice, and I'm honored to be here today. It is also meaningful and important for me to be here on the occasion of the Day of Remembrance because this is part of my own history. As a Yonsei, a 4th-generation Japanese American, February 19th will always be remembered as the day that President D. Roosevelt issued the Executive Order 9066, precipitating the evacuation, incarceration, and systematic disenfranchisement of 120,000 Japanese American citizens, including my family. You can move this slide. So my grandparents, Yuri and Bill Kochiyama, pictured here, were both Nisei. They were 2nd-generation Japanese American citizens. They were born in the 1920s and just entering adulthood in February of 1942. My grandma Yuri's family was incarcerated in a concentration camp in Jerome, Arkansas. And my grandfather Bill was sent to a concentration camp in Topaz, Arizona. Like all Japanese Americans at that time, my grandparents' families were stripped of everything: their dignity, their property, their homes, their jobs, and the basic rights of American citizenship during World War II. Although they would not fully comprehend the racist implications of Executive Order 9066 until many years later, their experiences during the war, including encountering Jim Crow for the first time in Mississippi, significantly impact and informed a new sense of themselves as people of color in America as they began to build family and community in post-World War II Harlem. You can go to the next slide. So this is my family in Harlem in the late 60s. My cousin Zulu is in the middle, so they already had grandchildren at this point. This February, in this week, is also particularly meaningful because February 21st marks the 60th anniversary of the martyrdom of Malcolm X. It was Malcolm X who Yuri credited with awakening her political consciousness and showing her the history of connections between the experiences of Asian and African peoples under white supremacy and imperialism. You can go to the next slide. Yuri first met Malcolm in 1963. His friendship and mentorship dramatically changed her life and her political perspective. Soon after meeting him, she joined his group, the Organization for Afro-American Unity, to attend the Liberation School and to work for racial and human rights. On June 6, 1964, these are pictures from that day, Malcolm X visited my grandparents' home in the Manhattanville Projects just down the street to meet with 3 writers from the Hiroshima-Nagasaki Peace Study Mission who were on a world tour speaking against the proliferation of nuclear arms building. They were also hibakusha, they were atomic bomb survivors, and wanted to meet Malcolm X more than any other person in America. When Malcolm arrived at my grandparents' crowded apartment, it was clear that he understood the connections between what had happened to the Japanese and what was happening to Black people in the United States. He talked about his time in prison, about the history of colonialism in Asia and Africa, about the People's Republic of China and his admiration for Mao Zedong, and he called for solidarity with Vietnam's struggle against colonialism, neocolonialism, and imperialism. Yuri's education at the OAAU's Liberation School and her exchanges with Malcolm inspired a lifelong interest in studying history and her development of a much broader international anti-imperialist political perspective, as well as a deep commitment to the Black liberation movement, both here in the United States and in Africa, and to supporting Puerto Rican independence, Hawaiian sovereignty, and countless other international struggles for human rights, for liberation, and for sovereignty. It is through Malcolm X that Yuri first began to understand how our experiences of oppression, of racism and violence, of sexism and capitalist exploitation as BIPOC people are connected, and that self-determination and liberation will depend on self-education and broad solidarity. So it's important and relevant, I think, that we acknowledge and reflect on the legacy of Malcolm X and his profound influence and impact on Yuri and so many activists in understanding the power and possibilities of radical solidarities. You can go to the next slide. So February is also important because February is Black History Month. Officially designated in 1976 to recognize and acknowledge and celebrate and educate all Americans about the history and contributions of people of African descent in this country, Black History Month is important and necessary. For more than 50 years, educational and cultural institutions and businesses have dedicated time and resources to recognizing this national month of observance. In fact, just a few years ago, corporations and foundations were expanding their investment in promoting Black History Month and their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in general in response to racial upheavals across the country. As we witness anti-DEI legislation and the consequent dramatic rollback of resources, programming, and the elimination of jobs for people of color and women that has taken place across the public and private sector under the new government regime during Black History Month, we must understand that what is happening now is connected to the broader attack on oppressed and marginalized communities internationally under organized and increasingly blatant and violent expressions of white supremacy and imperialism. You can go to the next slide. At the same time, the development of new Black, Asian, and BIPOC coalitions that seek to build solidarity through education and the broad mobilization of young people and communities across the country and nations, You can go to the next slide. Around the world, raising their voices against genocide and calling for divestment and the end of the Israeli occupation of Palestine over the past year shows us the power, the value, and necessity in solidarity, in standing up for everyone's humanity in response to racial oppression and violence. You can go to the next slide. Committed to fighting against polarization and injustice and promoting solidarity broadly, Yuri supported and collaborated with a wide range of activists, movements, and communities over the course of more than 50 years. She advocated for political prisoners, worked with Asian American, Latino, and Native American organizations for racial justice, and international movements against the war and nuclear proliferation. And she supported the Black arts movement. From watching her host guests and organize events in her home, and tagging along with her to meetings, cultural events, marches, and demonstrations throughout New York City when I was a kid, to accompanying her on the college speaking circuit when I was a young adult, I learned that what was most radical about Yuri was her level of compassion and empathy, her genuine interest and respect for the value and humanity of every person she met. I know that a big part of her boundless capacity for empathy, her passion for justice, and the belief in the strength of everyday people started in the concentration camps during World War II, watching her mother and the elders around her pull together the shattered pieces of their lives and their community to make a viable, dignified life for their children and families. My grandparents' shared commitment to providing hospitality to people and supporting movements for civil and human rights was powerfully informed by the humbling, painful, traumatizing experience of loss and displacement during World War II. For Yuri, it sparked a passion for justice and a lifelong dedication defending the human dignity of all people. So for many reasons, this Day of Remembrance gathering to commemorate the Executive Order 9066 and the consequent violence, forced relocation, and lost Japanese American citizens' experience is particularly relevant and important, as it enables us to come together to learn about and reflect and acknowledge this part of our history and supports the greater effort to protect and support the humanity of other people and communities targeted by racism, violence, and displacement right now. The mass arrests, incarceration, deportations, family separations, racial and religious targeting of specific communities, and mobilization of military surveillance technologies we are witnessing right now is all too familiar. We must understand that these connections and call out this history in order to stop repeating it. We must understand that what we are seeing now, people and communities systematically targeted, surveilled, detained, displaced, incarcerated, and murdered based on racial and religious prejudices. The criminalization of teaching history, banning books, and the destruction of cultural institutions and family legacies is part of an organized, sustained effort to disenfranchise, disempower, and control marginalized and oppressed communities. You can go to the next slide. Radical solidarity, self-education, and love are the most powerful weapons we have against these forces, which is why they work so hard to polarize us and keep us in ignorance. I know if she were here today, Yuri would be encouraging all of us to continue to stay in community with each other and to keep connecting with others and collectively standing up for the human rights of oppressed people everywhere. As we reflect together today on the intent and impacts of the Executive Order 9066 amidst new anti-immigration legislation, as we reflect on the life and legacy of and martyrdom of Malcolm X, on the struggles and resilience and contributions of people of African descent in the United States, on the forced removal of Palestinians and the genocide now taking place in Gaza, in the Congo, and Sudan, on the many ravages of imperialism rapidly expanding before our eyes. Know that there are many ways to be in solidarity. One of the most important lessons I learned from growing up, watching my grandparents engage with countless people, organizations, and communities, was that they connected and supported people in so many different kinds of ways. I experienced radical solidarity as daily practice. Whether your solidarity practice is inviting someone to eat in your home, or cooking for others, or providing space, or childcare, or mutual aid, or making art, or supporting artists, or writing a letter, or organizing a march, or a protest, or collective action, there are countless ways we can work together and support one another. Before I close, I just want to share a short clip. It's a video of my grandparents talking about some of their memories during the war. For context, in the late 1980s, Japanese-American filmmaker Renee Tajima Pena traveled with my grandparents to Mississippi and Arkansas. She documented parts of that trip in her film, My America, Honk If You Love Buddha. So we're just going to show a short clip of it. Okay.
Okay, and JT, look. Wait a minute, I want to get another one. A two-story.
I join up with a pair of old friends from New York City.
Buildings all next to each other. 220, so it's got to be. No, 220. So it has to be next to. I mean, they can't change.
Our first stop together is Rosedale. Their oldest son, Billy, came here as a freedom rider in 1964. I never met Billy, but I know he died young.
Hi, so you're
The Kochiyamas are here to visit the Davises, the family Billy stayed with that freedom summer.
And you Billy's father?
That's right.
Hi. I was trying to think how many people are staying here during the time Billy was here. I believe it was about 20.
They were all staying right here?
They all stayed right here.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Up here, right up from the bank, it was a restaurant, and blacks weren't allowed in it at all. And Billy and them used to go up there and sit down every day in front of the restaurant. Every day, they never did fail. Well, they kept on, and they got to fighting up there. Black people started going in the restaurant. And I guess that's about the biggest major thing at that particular time, because everybody thought it was very impossible to get them to let black people in there.
This visit to Mississippi is like a homecoming in more ways than one. Bill and Yuri's romance began right here at Camp Shelby in the middle of World War II. Tell me when you first met.
Oh, but he doesn't even remember, do you?
Oh, yeah.
You never remember that date. Right, when was the date?
November something?
Yeah. But you don't remember the date?
43 or
No, but
42.
the date. November of what?
I don't know.
20th.
Well, I first met her November 20th, 1943, and when a busload of visiting GIs were given a pass to spend a weekend at the concentration camp known as Jerome, Arkansas. We arrived at camp around 2 in the morning, and she was the only one there greeting us, and it was her customs to get their names, and she would say, well, what island are you from? And so when she asked me, you know, I was being a smart ass, I says, I come from Manhattan Island.
Of course, he was very good looking and quite dashing. And I guess the fact that he was from New York made him seem like, you know, a very sharp kind of guy. Always giving, as he says, smart ass remarks. But you know how women think that's sort of clever or something.
Bill and Yuri's love affair always struck me as something right out of a Hollywood screenplay. Bill was a young GI with the all-Japanese American 442 Battalion. But there was one glitch in this love story. While Bill was fighting the Nazis overseas, Yuri was a prisoner in Arkansas at a concentration camp for Japanese Americans.
Here in the land of Buffalo Bill, the government is erecting model camp towns. towns in which they'll live unmolested, not as prisoners, but free to work and paid by the United States government. Bathtubs, yes, all the comforts of home. The Japanese in America are finding Uncle Sam a loyal master despite the war.
Wait a minute, yeah, that's all that's left, maybe? Where was the camp? Wait a minute. What's all that empty space? Is that the camp?
I've taken a bulldozer and buried this thing.
And buried what thing?
The camp.
Oh, you did it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you bulldozed the whole camp?
Yes, buried.
Buried
The
it?
buried city. See, this was blocks. You remember well the streets, you know.
Yeah,
There was
yeah.
10,000 of y'all here.
Right.
Now, look at here. Y'all weren't prisoners of war.
Well, we were so...
You was interned for your protection, they claim, you know. When we came, I came and
We
went.
considered ourselves prisoners of war. But wait a minute, wait. What I want to know
I
is...
thought they had an injustice done to them.
Oh,
Because I fell in love with them. I mean, I was here with them every day. And
really? You knew the Japanese people?
I was in here with them.
Wait, can I get a shot of you? Put your head out more because I can't see your face. Unless you could open the door. What's his name again?
John Ernest.
John Ernest Ellington. Wait a minute. No piece of paper, just a piece of paper.
I wouldn't have one.
How did the people around Jerome feel about the Japanese coming here?
Well, all those people that was here is dead and gone. We talked about 40-something years ago, girl.
right, 40
and these young folks don't even know what it's all about.
Oh. But how did they feel?
Well, they felt like me. They felt like they were mistreated. When you was around them and with them, look at here. When the water department come and bringing those messages in here of the dead, they cried just like the white people. They lost many a son and husband.
By the end of the war, we thought we were becoming expendable,
Well, what do you mean by that?
that we were always the point of an attack.
I guess I can just hold this. Is this on? Yeah? So I just wanted to share this clip because I think it centers us in some of my grandparents' memories of incarceration and the impact of that experience. And while it does evoke the pain and loss of Japanese American incarceration during World War II, it also, I think, shines a light and opens a window into our innate humanity and the impact and power and beauty of our capacity as humans, right, to have empathy, no matter what side we're on or what side we think we're on. In closing, I'd like to thank the Union Theological Seminary again for holding this space today and for continuing to provide opportunities for people to come together, to learn, to raise awareness, and to support truth-telling in response to violent and persistent systems of racism and oppression. Thank you.
I know our time is coming to a close. Just wanted to say thank you all so much for taking the time to be here today, for showing up for this particular history. And I think and thank you so much, Akemi, for being here today and sharing your story, sharing your family's legacy. Something I was originally going to lead a short reflection, and I just want to just share a couple words, which is, I think in this moment in time, I'm so struck by the friendship of your grandmother, Yuri, and Malcolm X, and what it means, because I think, we can feel called to the movement spaces, we feel called to show up in the streets, and all that's important, but how are we cultivating friendships? How are we struggling together? How are we working through conflict? How are we showing up when we're tired? And this is kind of the lesson I think that is staying with me today. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Akemi. And we'll close with a song by the Blue Scholars as you are making your way out. It's a song by the Blue Scholars called Yuri Kochiyama. Thank you all.
Still think it's relevant, even if them kids cop the shirts and stop wearing them. Humbled in the presence of the veterans and not the ones who picked up their guns, but who picked up their brethren and sisterin. History in the making, I was witnessing, listening. Seen this old Japanese lady with a sticker on her walker said, "Free Mumia," and this was before the Trustafarians were saying it. Taking it for granted that we talk about the 60s and never get to talk to anybody who done lived the shit and still exists. Or better yet, she still resists. Speaking to a myriad of young, dumb, and ignorant kids, I was one of them. Stuck around lingering. Said that it's a privilege to meet you in person, and she took my hand, said it's good to meet you too. And when I'm out of school, asked me what I'm gonna do. I had to think about it, but truth is I knew that it was something for the youth and shit. Truly, I'd probably be a teacher if the music didn't make enough to make me wanna gamble on its sustenance, and that's why I'm writing this to tell you.